Season's greetings to you and welcome to Network Africa. I'm Gbenga Ashiru. On this edition of the program, we'll be looking at how Christmas was spent all around Africa. Many have been trying to find out if there is an African version of Christmas. Well, let's start from South Africa, where South Africans will be spending their first ever Christmas without their affectionate leader, the late Madiba. And in South Sudan, it's Christmas of war. While Nigerians repatriated from Saudi Arabia just recently would surely have their share of the fairy tale called Christmas. And now for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Find out the telltale signs of what comes after being labeled a terrorist group. While it's still a time to make a wish, and as Christian faithful cried out to the high heavens for a spiritual reprieve, let's review the Pope's Christmas message titled "To the City and to the World," as that marks Pope Francis' maiden Christmas message.
Pope Francis, celebrating his first Christmas as leader of the world's 1.2 billion Roman Catholics, yesterday urged people to shun pride and selfishness and open up their hearts to God and their fellow man. Francis, who last March became the first non-European Pope in 1,300 years, celebrated a solemn Christmas Eve Mass for some 10,000 people in a packed St. Peter's Basilica, as hundreds of others watched on large screens in the square outside. Francis delivered a short homily that was as simple as his white vestment. Man can choose between darkness and light. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. Yet, on the part of the people, there are times of both light and darkness, fidelity and infidelity, obedience and rebellion, times of being a pilgrim and times of being a people adrift. In our personal history too, there are both bright and dark moments, lights and shadows. If we love God and our brothers and sisters, we will walk in the light. But if our heart is closed, if we're dominated by pride, deceit, self-seeking, then darkness falls within and around us. Francis, who celebrated the Mass with more than 300 cardinals, bishops, and priests, urged people not to be afraid to reach out to God.
Just as was mentioned earlier, it's one season when you could really make wishes, and if wishes were horses, people living in South Sudan, especially in the city of Bor, would be praying hard for an end to the reported summary executions and mass graves found in the area. At the moment, world leaders under the aegis of the United Nations are intensifying efforts to calm the tension in the region. Now, President Salva Kiir and Mr. Machar, former deputy, have been urged to come to the negotiating table to find a solution to the crisis, which is fast turning into an ethnic war.
UN Security Council on Tuesday voted to enlarge the number of UN peacekeepers in South Sudan to protect civilians from the worsening violence. The Council approved to expand the peacekeeping forces to include 12,500 servicemen and 1,323 policemen from its current number of 7,900 respectively. During the press briefing held out of the vote, Mr. Ban Ki-moon said they would send 5,500 peacekeeping servicemen and 440 policemen first to South Sudan. The additional servicemen and policemen will help reinforce the UN bases in a bid to protect about 45,000 civilians sheltered there. Mr. Ki-moon said the crisis in South Sudan was a political crisis which requires a peaceful political solution, and he urged the leaders of South Sudan to bring an end to the violence.
As part of the Nigerian government's long-standing commitment to regional and global peace, Nigeria's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Noor Mohammed, led a delegation to meet the President of South Sudan, Mr. Salva Kiir. The mission was to discuss the possibility of Nigeria's intervention in the crisis. Now, the Nigeria's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Noor Mohammed, joins us in this phone interview.
We understand that you were in
South Sudan to carry out an impact assessment of the situation in that country. Could you tell us some of your findings?
I was in South Sudan yesterday, Juba precisely, the special envoy of President Goodluck Ebele, together with some senior Nigerian government officials. And we were all received in Juba, where we dropped straight to the State House, and where we met with the President Salva Kiir immediately. And essentially to deliver a message from his colleague and brother, President Goodluck Ebele, to ask him about his assessment of the problem in his country and his proposals for solution, and to offer Nigerians unconditional availability to mediate in the crisis. As you know, Nigeria has been involved in the Sudan crisis since the 90s with Abuja 1 and Abuja 2, and we are moving to the Security Council in January, that's next week. And our commitment to peace and security in our sub-region in Africa, this is all a familiar terrain with Nigeria, and it was well received, the offer by the Southern Sudanese, and of course the regional speakers, intergovernmental social development, and conversations are ongoing. We are trying to open up channels with the protagonists in the southern part of the country, that is the former vice president.
It looks a very much sad season for Nigerians being repatriated as illegal immigrants from Saudi Arabia. Now, recently, 80 deportees arrived Nigeria out of the 508 registered illegal immigrants set to return after the expiration of 4 months amnesty by the Saudi authorities. But the big question is, how did these Nigerians get to Saudi Arabia without the knowledge of the Nigerian embassy in Saudi Arabia? Now, let's join Nigeria's ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Ambassador Abubakar Bono, in this phone interview. It certainly looks like a sad Christmas for the 508 repatriated Nigerians just yesterday. Could you give us some comments on how they were repatriated and the welfare of these deportees?
Yes, as we are aware of the clampdown on immigration laws, in Saudi Arabia, which for over 8 months, they asked all nationals who are staying here to legalize their papers. Otherwise, they have to go back to their countries as usual. So far, we have some nationalities here in this kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and about the 508 we are talking about is those who willingly come forward, where they want to go back home. That's Nigeria.
It's quite surprising that they allow the 4 months expiration of the amnesty to lapse before taking this decision. At this period, what did they do about it?
No, we have been enlightening them, asking them to come forward. Anybody who can, they usually come in two categories, either Umrah or Hajj. So if you overstay, they give you a chance to legalize your paper. If you want to stay here, maybe you have to get somebody who are working under him. And we have been appealing to Nigerians over there. They should make sure that they should try and legalize their stay here. But you know how sometimes we behave, So they just keep silent and keep quiet, until the expiration of the deadline comes. And then they start chasing them on the streets of their houses, and that's why it's not only Nigeria, all the nationalities who are staying here. There are some ones who are staying without legalized papers. So it's not only particular to Nigeria, it's all the nationalities. Some of them, Ethiopians, Pakistani, Egyptians, Yemenis, and others.
It's on record that we have 1 million Nigerians who lived and worked in Saudi Arabia. But the question is, how come there is no record of those who came there illegally? And how did they get there illegally without the knowledge of the embassy?
You just said record. That is just an estimation or approximation. Nobody can tell you how many Nigerians are in this kingdom or in this country. Because some, they are here over 20, 30 years. They have children. And we always ask them to come forward to register who they are. You know, are they Nigerians or not? But they refuse to do that. So you can hardly, you know, mention or say that this figure is actually Nigeria the kingdom, but you can only make an estimation. They came through Hajj or Umrah or through Yemen, Sudan, you know, for over 40, 50 years, but some of them, they came to this kingdom. So you hardly can tell what is the exact figure, because we try to tell them to come and register, because you see somebody with a family of 20, 30 years, but they wouldn't like to come forward and register. And then some of them, they are staying here for 20, 30 years back, or 40 years back, even 50 years back here in this country.
In our interview segment, we'll be looking at the wave of political crisis in Africa and the challenge of insecurity. Recently, the president of Nigeria ratified the Arms Trade Treaty as Boko Haram insurgents was being labeled a terrorist organization. Also, let's find out what's happening to the political roadmap in Mali, as there are still pockets of violence in Kidal, while the Guinea-Bissau still contends with the offshoot of a political crisis in Bissau. In our mission to set the record straight, Network Africa goes one-on-one with Nigeria's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Nuruddin Mohammed. He joins us in this dialogue. You're welcome on this edition of Network Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Ashu.
So now let's just quickly go into the heart of the story regarding the Malian peace mission. It has evolved from the ECOWAS mission to the AFISMA mission, and now we're talking about the MINUSMA mission. How would you say this intervention process has fared so far in restoring peace and stability to Mali?
Thank you very much. To us in ECOWAS, and let me say Africa generally, Mali is one of our success stories, where concerted regional, continental, and global efforts, and the way we moved to achieve consensus on what is the cause of the crisis, on how to address the crisis, actually worked at the end of the day. When the crisis started, it was essentially an ECOWAS affair. ECOWAS moved quickly, appointed a mediator and a co-mediator. President Goodluck Jonathan was the co-mediator. And ECOWAS made its own analysis that this is a very complex socio-political and economic problem which was rapidly deteriorating, which will need beyond normal diplomatic processes, will need some measure of force to address. That's what we were saying to the international community. That's what we're trying to sell to the African Union, to the United Nations Security Council. I was part of ECOWAS's delegation to the Security Council, where we canvassed this position, that, hey, we need some level of force here. There was initial reluctance, let me say, from the part of the international community, who were always saying there are marginalized groups, there are threatened groups like the Tuaregs in the north, they are not sure of the use of force, who end up paying out and so on. And they say they were asking us to go back and engage more in diplomatic process.
This is one area critics are raising the red flag of Nigeria's foreign policy in terms of the hostility that has greeted Nigerian citizens abroad. Now, Guinea-Bissau is one of those countries that has recorded a recent attack on Nigerians. So, now, what's your comments on this attack on Nigerians abroad?
Let me take you global, then come down to Guinea-Bissau. About 3-4 weeks ago, French citizens were seized in Kidal and murdered in cold blood. You could call the French government the savior of Mali. American citizens have been seized here and there in countries that the Americans are spending millions and billions of dollars and sinking American lives to ensure stability. That is a measure of prominence. That is a measure of how influential one country is in another country's affairs. So these roles that Nigeria played, became a huge source of frustration for some stakeholders who saw Nigeria standing between them and their personal interest in Guinea-Bissau. And that was how all that attack on Nigerians was orchestrated. We take that with big heart as big brothers, and we took the case of that Nigerian who lost his life to demonstrate the potency of our citizen diplomacy. We immediately demanded for apology. We immediately demanded for arrests. We immediately demanded for full-blown investigations, convictions, and reparations. And as I'm talking to you, we have gotten apologies from more than 5 quarters in Guinea-Bissau. The president then was out of the country. The prime minister visited the chancellery that was partly destroyed, and he apologized on behalf of his government. The president himself apologized on behalf of the government. In fact, the president had openly apologized at ECOWAS summit what happened to Nigeria, and they have made arrests, and they have made investigations, and they said it's politically motivated, and there will be convictions, and of course reparations. And that's why Mr. President said, hey, I must land in Bissau, show that Nigerians are not orphans. And Nigeria, Mr. President entered Bissau in a very big way. Bissau had not seen a visiting head of state over the last 2 years. Mr. President landed there, went round, addressed Parliament, addressed the cabinet, addressed the military, addressed the Nigerian community there, addressed the Nigerian community there, and promised that he will do everything within his reach. Mr. President had intended to arrive in Bissau the week that attack happened, just for the fact that the president was out of town attending Hajj in Saudi Arabia.